All right, well, welcome everyone. We're going to let people flow in. What a great response to this meeting. We're really excited to have everyone as we learn about funding camp sustainability. And I'm going to go ahead and rock and roll with it. So hello, everyone. My name is Danny Sudman, and I'll be your host for this webinar on funding camp sustainability. In just a few minutes, I'll be introducing our guest, David Phillips from Immersive First, and Leesa Carter-Jones from Captain Planet Foundation. Please use the chat window to introduce yourself. You can enter your name, your organization, and where you're located so we can start to see who all is in attendance today. We'll also invite you to turn your cameras on so we can see your smiling faces. It's nice as a presenter to have a face looking back at you, and I'm sure at this point we're all used to being up on Zoom. So also as we proceed through the program today, please feel free to ask questions in the chat window. We will at the end of our session have an open question and answer opportunity so that we can learn about what questions you have from the presentation and help direct our conversation moving forward. I'll also invite you, one of the fun features of Zoom is the reactions that you can go click on the icon in your bottom window there and react, do thumbs up or applause or hearts or maybe a sad face, depending on what it is, to kind of keep engaged as we move through the presentation. Right, so I started Green Camps because I believe in the power of the camp experience. And I saw an opportunity for the camp community to become a global model for what sustainability means and for what it looks like to the diverse communities that we serve. Today, the programmatic focus of Green Camps is the launch of the camp industry's first green certification program and our outreach efforts. You'll notice that research is at the top of this list of education outreach. Because we live in a data-driven society and we want to give you the data to make the right decisions when it comes to sustainability. I had the pleasure of connecting with Dr. Lincoln Larson at North Carolina State University to conduct a national research survey in the spring of 2021. Our focus was on the motivators and barriers to camp sustainability. So what's motivating camps to want to go green and be sustainable? And what are the barriers? What are the challenges they're facing? I'm proud to say that this year we were published in the Journal of Outdoor Recreation, Education, and Leadership. You can learn more about that research by visiting greencamps.org/research. This slide highlights what camps shared as the major barriers keeping them from pursuing camp sustainability. As you'll notice, 78.5% reported that they lack access to financial resources, and 75.8% reported that the cost of implementation is too high. In large part, these findings are what led the Green Camps Education Committee to plan and host this webinar. Again, learn more about the research at greencamps.org/research. There's also a webinar recording with Dr. Lincoln Larson explaining the results from this research study. During registration, more than 70 of you, applause, 70 of you opted in to participate in a free green needs assessment. Questions like these will not only help your organization define opportunities around sustainability, but will also contribute to a collection of data that Green Camps will use to create a case for support to fund green action at camps around the world. If you take one action as a result of this webinar, I hope you'll sign up to participate in this research, in this needs assessment, or if you're already signed up, that you'll log in and spend the 30 minutes to an hour to complete your free green needs assessment. Now, that's a variable number. Sometimes it can take a little bit more support from your team to answer these questions, but I hope you'll see the value in answering these questions and what that data will benefit, not only for your camp organization, but for camp sustainability in general. Also, after you've completed the survey, a Green Camp staff member will contact you to provide recommendations for next steps along your sustainability journey. So before I introduce our first guest, I do want to take a minute to define what sustainability means to me. I'm going to go ahead and invite you as well to type in the chat window, what does sustainability mean to you? I think this is really important because we hear words like sustainability thrown around quite a bit, and it's really important to define it. And that's what I encourage camps to really start their sustainability journey with, to invite folks around the table to have a conversation and define sustainability so that they can make informed decisions around that. I think of sustainability as how we make decisions, and I like to use the triple bottom line as a way to divide up the impact of our decisions into the three areas of people, planet, and profit, that bottom line piece. So when we make a decision about purchasing, about the resources that we're bringing into our organization, how do we make those decisions? What are they impacting? So the people, how can we be comfortable in an area? How can we positively influence the safety, the health, and the well-being of the people influenced by those decisions? The planet, how do our decisions impact the health and well-being of our planet? And then lastly, how can decisions support our bottom line? At the end of the day, even if we're a nonprofit organization, we need to make sure that we're being careful and aware of our bottom line. Sustainability can definitely lead to some positive impacts to our bottom line, as we'll discover throughout here. All right. So at this point, I am going to go ahead and introduce our speaker, David Phillips. I met David a year ago at the National ACA conference and really enjoyed attending his session and learning about his fundraising techniques. If anyone here, shout out to David. I'm sure a lot of folks in attendance have seen David present at camp conferences around the country. David Phillips is a native of the UK and principal of Immersive First Consulting, a firm that assists organizations with fundraising, planning and analysis, capital projects, governance, public relations, program creation and implementation, lay and pro coaching and acute challenges. Over his career, David has helped raise more than $140 million. As a consultant, he works with a variety of camps, retreat centers, community agencies, centers of worship, and schools. His passion is to do important things with good people that make a difference. He's a strong advocate for kindness and positive communal culture and has been instrumental in a series of initiatives around this and other priority issues. David, welcome. We're glad to have you. How are you today?
Honestly, I'm overwhelmed. I'd like to thank the Academy, my parents, and all the little people that have made this possible. Because this is the closest I'm ever going to get to any kind of award. But it's absolutely delightful to be with you. It's lovely to see some dear friends online, and even some of them on camera, which is even better. So it's great to be here, Danny, and thank you so much for allowing me to join you. I'll speak slowly because I know very few people here speak English. So I'll...
Well, again, welcome, and thank you again for sharing your time and your expertise in this subject. So David, my first question to kind of get the conversation going, and again, I'll remind all our viewers and listeners at home, we're really trying to spark conversation here. And so David is going to give us a good overview of some of these things. But as you have questions pop up, please feel free to drop those in the chat window so that we can get those towards the end of our session there, okay? So David, if I were to ask you, what are the 2 or 3 principal things that any aspiring fundraiser should consider, what would you tell them?
Great question.
Thanks.
No, thank you. A few things come to mind beyond the normal sarcasm that is inherently part of my DNA. Probably the most important thing is to understand where the money is, because we can spend an awful lot of time chasing dollars, but if we don't know where the money is, we may be chasing it in the wrong direction. So that's one thing, and I'll get to that in one second. And then the second thing is, all of you have all the raw ingredients to be fabulous fundraisers. The challenge is that sometimes it's not our go-to special place because we're more interested in working with children or doing camp type things. And the truth is, you all have the raw ingredients. It's really a matter of recognizing that, understanding it, nurturing it, and challenging yourself to actually do it And I'm going to say this because I think it's what sustained my career as a fundraiser in an authentic way, so that you are honest with yourself, you're honest with the donor, you're honest with your organization. That transparency and that honesty buys you tremendous credibility. And the story I usually tell, and those of you who've probably been in my sessions may have heard me say this, there's two types of fundraisers. I live in Florida for my sins, and if a donor came and said to me, hey, I want to fund alligator ponds in preschools, I would say, you're out of your gourd. You're nuts. That's a stupid idea. I probably wouldn't say it that way, but I would likely make it very clear that that makes no sense. There's another type of fundraiser who would say, are we talking small alligators or big alligators? If you want to be successful in fundraising, you've got to be authentic and honest with yourself and with the donor. And what I found is they can get pissed at you for the honesty. But what happens is after a little while, could be an hour, a week, a month, a year, they come back and they say, you know, you were actually the one who told us the truth. And that buys you tremendous credibility. I just want to go to my first point about know where the money is. So let me just share the screen quickly. And I have, can folks see that? I want to make sure you can see it. Excellent, thank you for the thumbsy up. It's important to know where the money is, and this is where it is, right? Actually, let me do this first. There we go. 95% of households give to recipient organizations, right? And this is the breakdown of where the money is going. And you can find this online. It's very easy. Giving USA has this, but you can see it's split between religion, education, human services, foundations, health, arts, culture, and humanities. You guys in the sustainability space probably are fitting somewhere, I would imagine, between health, arts, culture, humanities, education. And you can see which areas have seen growth. Now, the thing to remember is, depending upon what our beloved politicians are doing, the philanthropic world tries to make up the screw-ups that they enact into law. So if you see a defunding of social services, philanthropy will step up. So what you're seeing here is data from 2021. And regardless of your political persuasion, this is a response to what happened for the previous 2 or 3 years to that. So that's one thing. The second thing is understand where the money is. The average US household is giving $2,240 a year. That is not enough to move your needle necessarily. So understand where the big money is. And as you can see, the United States, the most philanthropic place in the world, we donate 484 billion with a B, right? It's like Sesame Street, brought to you by the letter B. That's up 4% from the previous year. And look where the money's coming from. It's coming from individuals. It's not that foundations aren't giving it, but by the way, there's overlap between individuals and foundations because some people start their own foundations. Money's there. Bequests is, how do you put this nicely? That's sperm to worm. When you die, where are you putting your money? And if you look, lots of people are fixated on getting corporate sponsorships. That is not where the money is. You may get something, but those are not philanthropic gifts. Those are sponsorships, and there's a quid pro quo that comes with it. Whether that's you get money from your local Honda dealership, guess what? You're not driving a Nissan. Or you're getting it from a corporation and they want their name on your website. Whatever it is, the real money, Danny and folks, it's coming from individuals. And that's the point I want to make to you. And individuals take time to build relationships. There's something called moves management. You can look it up, where you bring someone along a continuum. But ultimately, be yourself and know where the money is. And I'm going to give you back the screen if I can work out how to do it. But there you go. That's the simplest answer to a great question. Thank you, Danny.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you so much, David. Someone did ask where to find reference for this information.
Giving USA is an organization that puts this out, so you can sort of go there or just Google Giving USA. US Philanthropy has it, but basically, if you Google giving trends, national US giving trends, it will pop up. Perfect. And by the way, this is really important for those of you. Most of you have boards of directors. Boards are under the impression that it's coming from corporations. They are misled. Put them right. Educate your board, because the money should be coming from them and their peers, because that's where the big money is.
Absolutely. Or bring David in and have David educate your board as well. It's another option, right?
Oh, I wouldn't do that. I'm terrible. Bad move. Bad move.
And so looking at all these opportunities, thanks for sharing that. I see some folks are showing some links in the chat window. The objective of all this conversation and the outcome and some of the things that David's sharing with us will ultimately culminate in a resource that we'll be developing as a result of this webinar. So the questions that you're asking, the resources coming in, some of the other research I've done. Again, we've only got an hour and a half or so with our question and answer in there. There's limited in what we can share right now. So we're really focusing on some of those high level things. So David, again, thank you so very much.
My pleasure. I'm gonna put the direct link in there for you. That will get you there.
Perfect.
It gets you the high level. If you want more, you have to pay, as Emily just pointed out. Bless America.
Awesome. Well, next I'm gonna bring on our next guest and introduce Leesa Carter Jones. Since joining Captain Planet Foundation in 2012, Leesa Carter Jones has spearheaded the launch of programs that have helped global youth catalyze their empathy and run effective campaigns against environmental crisis. This includes the Planeteer Alliance, Captain Planet Foundation's just launched and largest program to date that expands on 5 years of training and global coalition of youth activists. She has 25 plus years of executive level experience in sustainability and is a recognized, respected speaker in the fields of leadership, environmental stewardship, and youth education programs. Leesa, welcome. Thanks for being with us today.
Thank you. Fun to be here.
Excellent. Well, I'm curious, everyone who's listening, maybe a shout out if anyone watched Captain Planet Foundation. I think it's fascinating that's come full circle, because that was early on one of my first introductions to sustainability and the push for that. I bet you get a lot of that.
Yes, and I'm sure there are Planeteers on the call today. So yeah, Captain Planet, the Planeteers was a Saturday morning cartoon that was created by Ted Turner and Barbara Pyle, and it ran in the early 90s. And it basically, the mythology of the show is that there were 5 teenagers from different continents, and they all were given the powers of the earth, different elements of the earth from Gaia, and they would see environmental injustice or social injustice happening. They would combine their powers, and the power of their collaboration created Captain Planet, and they would defeat the eco-villains. And what's really fascinating and a little sad probably is that the things that were being talked about in the early 90s are still very much issues today, and probably accelerating issues today. And so what the Captain Planet Foundation does and has done for 32 years is to engage and empower young people to step in and be part of the solution making. And so I love that y'all have your camps, and that you're interested in introducing more sustainability to that. I think that's a really excellent opportunity for the young people who are attending your camps.
Excellent. Well, we're excited to bring in your thought expertise and share some ideas and resources with us as well. So my first question for you to kick it off. So you've been engaging youth to take green action through your work with Captain Planet Foundation. What advice do you have for how camps can engage campers to strengthen their case to fund and support sustainable action?
Well, I think the first thing I would say is don't underestimate their capacity or their power. Like we always tell the young people that we work with that youth is their superpower, and that the things that they ask adults to do or systems to adapt to are much more well received than when their adult counterparts or other, environmentally focused adults ask the same question of their peers. It just works better when the young people are a part of that solution making. And just to give you a sense, so we've trained 3,500 young people from 90 countries over the last several years how to be more effective at change making and really getting in and helping to evolve systems. And they've done everything from stopping large shipping ports from destroying their barrier reefs, to getting statewide single-use plastic policies passed, to getting their school districts to change supply chain policies around single-use plastics and other environmentally impactful purchasing behaviors. They have run really incredible awareness raising campaigns. They've stood up organizations to improve and restore the environment on places like Lake Victoria and other large water bodies. They're extremely powerful once they understand how to unlock those systems and ask for change. And so I would center them in your efforts and let them be really a part of designing and creating the plan that you have, because they're going to be much more engaged in helping you achieve those outcomes. And I think also from a fundraising standpoint, I think when you authentically are centering youth voice and youth participation in your efforts, the funders who are interested in supporting that kind of work will show up for you. And so that's always super helpful. Awesome. We have programs that we can provide for you free of charge that are so we have a program called the Planeteer Alliance, which is the one that I was talking about earlier. And what it is not only the training program that you all can tuck into, but it is a persistent community of young change makers. So it lets, I just put the link in the chat. It lets young change makers meet their counterparts in other parts of the country and other parts of the globe and learn. They share a lot of peer-to-peer, like, oh, well, that happened to me and this is what I did to adapt, or or they just cheer each other on and help each other with their eco anxiety and other issues that they're all dealing with that are, those are new ideas to us. My generation, we recognize that there was environmental issues, but we didn't have the sort of heightened eco anxiety that some of these young people are experiencing. And so it's just a great place for them to land. And then also this other one, which is called Hero of the Planet, which are quests that the young people can go on to understand and begin to implement change-making campaigns around things like pollinators, around things like healthy and regenerative soils, around water issues, around energy. So it helps them go on sort of a self-guided journey, or they could do it as a group or as a club at the camp. And then it invites them at the end. It shows them projects that they could do as models, or they can come up with their own project based on what they're dealing with locally or at your particular camp. And so those are all free resources, and we would be just delighted if you all took advantage of them.
Thank you for sharing those resources, Leesa. I'm curious, do you have any, when it comes to like getting folks into action and getting a group of youth, like any advice on what you have found to help kind of corral folks? I think resources like what you're offering can be really helpful because it provides some guidance. But any other thoughts around how to keep your groups focused and attentive and on track so that we're not, investing all this time and energy to try to do these things? That's one thing we focus on at Green Camps is we want to be smart. Sustainability is more than just the environment, right? How can we be smart about our time and our energy and resource investment in that? So how can camps invest in programs like this in a smart, sustainable way?
Yeah, I would say primarily letting the young people know that they are going to be part of solutions and the implementation of solutions. And it's funny because even, we work with, it's all we do is work with young people in this space. But one of our newer colleagues, who is what we call a near peer, she, because what we also have found is that they're much more interested in learning from and talking to each other than they are to listening to the adults that they think cause the issues. And so we have a lot of peer-to-peer training and near peers who are, in their early 20s and feel close enough in age that the kids are still willing to listen to them. And so she had pointed out, she was like, the thing is like, we don't need to raise awareness anymore. Like, that was the thing that your generation did. Like, you guys were constantly trying to raise awareness, and like, that's not necessary. Everybody knows there's a problem. What young people want to do is understand how they can engage in being part of the solution. And to understand that there are reasonable and practical steps that can be taken and that they can participate in. And so I think that would be my biggest recommendation, is to let them know that this is just not about that we're going to talk about that there's a problem. We're actually going to get in there and be part of this solution.
Excellent. Yeah, solutions driven. That's such an interesting perspective on where the shift has gone. And I think the other piece to collect on, and I think a big takeaway for everybody, is how do we empower the youth voice? I was working on a presentation for a camp conference a year or so ago, collaborating with another camp professional who advocates for sustainability. And we were talking about speakers to bring on. She's like, all this, it's all adults. This is a bunch of adults sitting around the table having this conversation. So we actually brought in Sophia Kiani, who's the youngest member of the U.S. Attorney General's group for sustainable development. And it was so empowering to have that youth voice. So what a great opportunity to really inspire that, to build that up. So very cool.
Yeah. Yes. And I would say, everybody's trying to center youth, but they're not actually centering youth. Like, and we've been doing a lot of work with the UN and the UN Environment Program. They define youth as 25 to 34. So the problem is that we work with 10 to 25-year-olds. And these kids are popping at 8 years old. All of a sudden, they realize that there's actually a calamity on the horizon, and they want to engage. Their immediate response is, "What are we going to do about it?" And so, how do we meaningfully and truly provide representation for them in that? So I think I applaud you for doing that, because I think it's really important.
Excellent. Well, Leesa, again, thank you very much. We appreciate those ideas and actions. And again, please, folks, if you have questions or want more information about this, and thank you for sharing those resources. I think we'd love to see camps implement. There are so many great resources out there for sustainability. And we want to know how that works. As a community, word travels really fast. And so if we get a couple camps that try these programs and they're successful, it's something that could be shared amongst other camps to implement some of these actions and really empower the voice of the youth campers that we're serving. So thank you again for those resources as well.
Of course.
Excellent. All right, so we're gonna bring David back up front and center.
I wouldn't do that. You're gonna ruin the whole thing.
I don't think cameras break anymore. They're really well designed these days. So
I could challenge that.
Well, David, I want to ask one more question of you. Let's consider some of the spaces and places you might look to better your chances of a successful philanthropic engagement. So where else can we look to find philanthropic engagement in your mind?
Sure. So the most obvious answers are usually the right ones, right? So if you have a board of directors, and there was a question from someone around, if you're not a non-profit, what could you do? But assuming you are for right now, I would look first at your board. If you have a weak board, then that's a problem, and your job is to change that board to a strong one, which means you should come to my sessions around strong board and weak board. That's really the only way of solving it, I can imagine. Assuming you can't make those, the truth is your board is the most important advocate for the work you do, and they have to sanction what you're doing. So the first thing I would do is look at the board. I would then look at the board to be participants as philanthropists. Every board member should be making a gift of significance to them. And notice I don't say what the number is, but it needs to be a gift of significance to them. Getting other people to give, which is give and get, or give or get, I'm I'm not a lover of give or get. It really needs to be give and get, right? If someone can't put an amount of significance to them into the fund that they're purporting to be a fiduciary of, then they're not the board members you need. So that's the first thing, is the board. Then you ratchet it out to the board connections. Who are their friends? If they're in business, they are likely engaged with other people of significance, in which case that's the goal. If someone is driving a Maserati, a Lamborghini, and an Aston Martin on 3 different days, that would be the person who I would consider going to. So without being facetious, look for the clues. If they tell you, I can't make the meeting, my yacht is in the Bahamas and I've got to go down there, that's a clue that firstly, you should be better friends with them and go on their yacht, but that's where the money is. So that's one, and it's their connections. There's also your alumni. Alumni is a tricky conversation. People think that alumni are going to raise a fortune. They don't. Typically, statistically, demographically, alumni will give you some money. They tend to be modest gifts. However, the art and science of this is if you can get your data placed through a wealth screen, there's a few things I would look for. So for example, if Marty Ferguson, who by the way, no one understands, Marty's a multi-millionaire. I just know this for a fact. But if Marty has made a gift to you of $500 or $1,000 or slightly incremental gifts for 4 years, I would research all who those people are. I would then say, what zip code do they live in? And if the average home price is $3 million, I would say, hold on, regular giver, has capacity because of his socioeconomic level. That's someone who I want to take away from receiving regular updates. And maybe I want to go and say, hey, Marty, could we meet for coffee? I'd love to tell you about what we're doing. So alumni is great if you search and data dive, right? Kara's question, Danny, if it's okay, was around, so what do you do if you're a for-profit entity, if you're a business? And what we're seeing is a number of entities creating, firstly, legally, you're not allowed to give a tax-deductible contribution letter to someone who is not a 501c3 or similar religious entity. So if you're a for-profit, what we're seeing is a number of them starting separate foundations that support that particular piece of work. There's a lot of ethics and value issues around that, but realistically, Kara, that's the best way to identify a way of raising money. Now, people can still give you money if you're doing good things, they just don't get a tax deduction for it. So in the end, and Kara, if you want to ask a follow-up, feel free. That's really the simplest answer to that. And Emily just put a question in. Danny, is it okay if I answer that, or would you prefer me to hold off?
No, we're on subject. Let's move on. Let's go ahead and answer that question. Thank you.
And there's Emily. She's waving at me. Do you want to ask the question, Emily? Go for it.
I was really interested in the comment that you made, about potential donors and this, this idea, someone that has a lot of money could be a great potential donor for a nonprofit or a green camp. But in your experience, if someone is living their lifestyle with 3 race cars and a yacht, is that someone who typically is going to be inspired enough by sustainability to sink money into it? I mean,
they're going to be inspired by you. This is the point, right? So firstly, we don't know whether the yacht is powered by photoelectric cells or whether it's using wind power. We don't know if that Lamborghini has been converted to an EV at enormous cost to the wealthy person. We don't know anything about them until we actually choose to engage with them and have a conversation. And it might just be, Emily, that what also happens is you educate that person that driving their Hummer, the unelectric version that's eating 9 gallons a mile, is not in the best interest, and that your values and your beliefs help transition their perspective. So my point is, you don't know until you go for it. You never know the answer.
In that sense, fundraising really is a kind of education. You talked about the difference between fundraising and teaching and how a lot of us are interested in working with youth and so forth, but
yeah, I'm not sure composting the rich is possibly the answer. And I mean, look, there's advanced plan giving opportunities where they make a gift and then you kill them very quickly. But I don't know if that's really in the best interests of your future. But Emily, is that helpful? Does that? I think the answer is this is a game of chess, and sometimes it's a gamble. And if you're going to play the game, go for it with people who have the resources, not the people who don't. With the deepest of respect, it's a cold-hearted fundraising perspective.
Yeah, and David and I, before this event, had some good conversations about how to present this subject. And again, I mean, there's so many rabbit holes that we could go down in this conversation. And I asked David about the difference of fundraising, or the specific fundraising for sustainability. And David, I think your response was, it doesn't matter what you're fundraising for. The technique and method is going to be the same. And I would add, for sustainability specifically, when you're making that pitch, being able to make a solid argument and provide evidence and resources and backing is only going to help strengthen that argument. And that's where resources like being able to show partnerships with Captain Planet Foundation or
absolutely. And to that point, and Marty had a question, I know, but Lupin asked, I'd balance that thinking. You absolutely balance the opinion, but the small gifts and the large gifts. But the truth is, there's two ways to raise $1,000. You ask one person for 1,000 or 1,000 people for one. Everything is between that. Everything else happens between those two markers. The most cost-effective, efficient, long-lasting version is to ask one person for more money than a ton of people for a little amount. But there are also opportunities where asking lots and lots of people for small amounts is important, because to Lupin's point, you're then engaging people in something that they start to feel ownership of, and maybe it helps change their perspective as well. So I just wouldn't see it cost effectively. It's much, much better to go for larger gifts, but engagement wise, nothing wrong with it. And Danny, is it okay to ask Marty if he wants to make $1 million gift to Green Camps, or he's got a question?
Yeah, Marty, go ahead. You said you have a question you'd like to verbalize.
And he's going to make a gift.
Right, yeah. No, thanhanks for telling everybody about my riches.
Sorry, Marty. I feel bad now.
That's okay. So I heard you say loud and clear that, everybody, all camp administrators and fundraisers think that their alumni are going to raise in millions, and that's not necessarily the case. Something I've been thinking a lot about recently is, and I imagine the answer to this is probably an entire session that you could lead, but is there a best practice? And like, for example, one of the things I'm thinking about is, do you start hammering them with donation asks, when they're 23 years old, they just graduated from college and they're no longer working for you as a counselor? Or are you waiting until a specific, maybe it's 10 years down the road, 15 years down the road, and they're reaching some, earning potential levels, that kind of thing?
As I would expect, Marty, it's a thoughtful, smart question. And I hate being sincere with you, because, it's way more fun to rib and mess with you. It's a great question. So there's a few things, paradigms to keep in mind around this. The first thing is connection and data. The person with the most data will win and rule the world. It's just the way it is. All of you with your TikToks, you're giving data to people. That data is so important, but having the data matters little if you don't keep it up to date. And the way to keep it up to date is to not keep sending people messages saying, is this the correct information? There are some internal things you could do. So, for example, every single person who calls you, by administrative precedent, you say, hey, Marty, thanks for calling. By the way, while I've got you on the phone, let me just check I've got the right contact information for you. If you remember, Comcast does it. Every major company you talk to does it. They do it for a reason, because they understand the power of the data. Point one. The second thing is asking. Ask for small gifts from people who can afford to give small amounts, but explain to them the power of the gift and the power of them being part of the collective. So with a major donor who you're asking for $1 million, you don't need to do that. But if I was talking to you and you were all alumni, I would say, look, there's 69 of us on the call right now. If each of you gave $5, we move the needle. And so sharing that, consistent, ongoing communication that does not overwhelm, and you define what that means. I'm not going to define it for you, but it's not every day and it's not necessarily every week. That has content. And to Marty's question, do you ask for money every time? I do not believe you do. I believe you develop a strategy that says, and you tell your alumni, we're not going to be asking you for money every 2 minutes. We're going to coordinate an annual campaign that takes place from this month to this month, and we really hope you participate. And that's when we're going to bombard you with requests and a phone call. So you make it very strategic, because the worst thing you can do is continually ask people for something they can't give you, because then you make them feel bad about their philanthropy. And no one should ever feel bad about their philanthropy. And finally, statistically, and this is why I'm trying to be nice to everybody, it's not because I like you or that I care to be nice. It's because some of you statistically are going to be extraordinarily wealthy at some point. That's the only reason I would really be nice to you, okay? Is I care about your future wealth because I'm a stone cold fundraiser, and that's what we do. So Marty, it's about growing the relationship as much as it is getting the money, data diving into specifics, and being strategic and honest, good communicators. By the way, demonstrating your impact. I mean, all the stuff Leesa was talking about is about impact. People don't necessarily want cute stories as much as they used to. They want to know, if I'm giving you 10,000, 100,000, $1 million, what is that going to do? And you better be able to demonstrate it. And my most important piece of advice is be honest, which is that piece about authenticity. If you have screwed up and you said you were going to enroll 100 kids and you only enrolled 60, tell the donor why. Tell them and tell them why. And what you'll find is they'll say, oh my God, you were honest? You know what? What would you need to get the other 40 enrolled? So, Marty, I hope that helps.
Yes, thank you. I appreciate that.
Awesome.
2 thumbs up.
Thank you so much for your question, Marty. David, for your answers and sharing all this great information for us. I do see there's a hand up. So Becky, I'm going to invite you to share your question. And we do have a couple other things to share. So if we can move forward with that, and we'll get back on with some other things. But Becky, I'm going to invite you to share your question.
Thank you. I have experienced in different organizations a sense of internal competition about what are we raising money for, and we're already working hard on these 2 campaigns. We can't start a new campaign on for a sustainability initiative because then we're spreading our donors too thin. And I've witnessed firsthand how more ask and more things to give can generate more donors. I know people who give to sustainability things that aren't going to give to the other thing, and I'm just wondering. I have just a little bit of anecdotal evidence about that. So I'm curious philosophically, and if there is data that backs up that you should not feel scared, and can we make a case internally to not feel scared to launch new sustainability fundraising initiatives because they are not in competition and will be a rising tide that lifts all boats. I don't know if that's just me or if that's real. I'd love your take on that.
Becky, I think you're probably spot on with a wrinkle in the space-time continuum, right? Which is we don't like saying goodbye to anything. In a twist of irony, our sustainability, not in terms of the practical notion of what sustainability is, and from a fundraising prism and from a programmatic prism, we don't like to jettison things that we've done for a long time. But everything has a beginning, a middle, and an end. And so what I would say to you is absolutely keep adding exciting new opportunities for people to donate, but at the same time, explore what you are currently offering and say, you know what, has that reached its fruitful life. Because what you don't want in 5, 10, 15 years is 35 programmatic elements you're trying to raise money for, and they're just not relevant anymore to what you are doing now. That model is really sort of a mass fundraising. If you're looking at individual mega donors or major givers, those are really hot button issues. And if I was talking to you, Becky, I would probably say, here's a few things we're doing, and then shut up and listen to what the person says. And if they turn around and say, well, that stuff doesn't interest me, but tell me again about your sustainability issue for composting. That one's kind of interesting to me because my mum taught me about that when I was a kid, and now I'm a captain of industry or whatever. Then you zero in on that one for them and stop offering them 30 other things. So 2 different models. I think you're spot on. What I don't want to ever do is stem creativity and opportunity, because you never know who's going to get turned on by it. Does that help? And Leesa, I don't know if you have a perspective on that. I don't want to in any way monopolize stuff, but Becky, does that help? And Leesa, do you have anything? I'll be quiet.
I totally agree. I mean, during COVID, we ended up having to adapt one of our programs because it was for school gardens, and none of the kids were in school, right? So we turned all those school gardens into growing spaces for the food bank, and it was fascinating to me because when we told that story and did a fundraising push to support the effort, a whole bunch of people who had been on our list forever and a day all of a sudden showed up with dollars who had never given before. And so I would not be concerned about that. I would definitely agree with David that you don't want to create like a giving panic, that there's too many choices and people get overwhelmed by the number of ways that they could give. But I would say that if you had a really clear goal with your sustainability efforts, and you push that ask out, that you would probably find dollars from people who are not currently giving, and maybe some dollars from people who are excited about that as well.
Thank you both.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you for that question, Becky. Getting lots of props from folks for asking good questions. We love a good question, right? That's what makes us think and find those opportunities. So thank you for sharing that. And I think it's a good transition to move back over to Leesa. So I'm going to ask you one final question, Leesa, before we start to wrap, and then open it up for some question and answer, and kind of related to what we were talking about, but beyond engaging with campers, that's what a lot of your focus is on. And it's the main thing I took away. What advice or resources would you direct camps to regarding funding sustainability work?
So, Captain Planet Foundation, we have the word foundation in our name, but we were a foundation for the first 20 years of our life. And then before I came on board, the board asked us to start operating programs and provide more programmatic support to education, both in formal K-12, but also in informal education spaces, which is very similar to what the camps are. So we don't necessarily still do grant making, although inside of our programs, there are small grants for the implementation of projects. So like, for example, in the project Hero, like the pollinator quest, there are funders who have come to us and said, here's $10,000 for you to gift out so that kids can actually put in pollinator gardens when they reach the end of that quest. And they have, they understand what specific types of plants they need to be planting for the pollinators that are in the area that they are in. And so there, there are grant dollars like that. And I would look at things like that. I also, to David's excellent earlier point about individuals, I think that if you have a sustainability effort that is happening at your camp, and you go to your local community foundations, or even to people who, like if you do 401k or your company does 401k, or people who are in the investment space, they have things that are called donor advised funds. So there are people, even, small family funds, that they come to them, they're like, we have $10,000 a year that we want to give specifically to people who are trying to implement, like, say, energy and water conservation efforts for their buildings, or who want to engage young people in environmental education, or who want to engage places in transitioning to composting or to other beneficial operational behaviors, right? So they have dollars that they give to these folks at these investment firms or at the community foundations, and they tell them exactly what they're willing to gift. And then those program officers actually do grants for those donor advised funds. And so what it requires is that you go and sit down and have a conversation with that program officer to say, here's the work that we're doing. And if you have anybody in your space who is trying to give to that work, we hope that you will be considering us. And here are the reasons why you should do so. So that I would definitely like to make sure you all know about, because that's not something that a lot of folks talk about in terms of getting individual dollars. And what it lets you do is talk to one person who has access to a lot of people's money. I also think that, Danny, it would be interesting. I don't know if you're up for this, but like a cooperative grant ask to a corporation, like somebody like Subaru or somebody else who really, or, Patagonia, those REI, the folks who want to talk to the kids who are going to these camps, because they are probably going to be their future consumers, to implement sustainability actions across. It would basically be a re-granting effort. Probably green camps would be the primary, but then the greater camp community could come for those funds. I think that if you had a group of camps that were pre-signed up to implement, and you had a really clear strategy, even if it was multi-year, I think that you could be really successful at that sort of activity. And then two other things that I would say I want to make sure everybody knows about. One is there is a lot of money on the street right now in the EPA from a lot of the federal funds that have gone out, and they're just getting ready to start gifting those dollars. They're multi-year grants. They're going to start at $75K and go up to $500K. And they are looking for collaborative grant making. So I don't know if y'all know about EPA's distribution, but they have different regional offices. So for example, their EPA Region 4 governs the whole Southeast, right? So even down where David is down in Florida. So if there was a group of camps in a regional designation who wanted to collaboratively go after one of those grants, I could absolutely see them doing that kind of investment, because they are giving environmental education grants, they're giving environmental and climate justice grants, and they're giving grants for children's health. So all three of those offices are distributing this money, and EPA has $2.8 billion with a B to give out over the next couple of years. And some of the grants will end up being non-competitive. So if you can even come to them with evidence of an implementation and an operational shift that you're going to do, that a non-competitive grant, as long as you meet the guidelines and you get in early enough in the asking, those grants get written, and it's not like you be somebody else getting those dollars. So I would just really recommend that everybody do some due diligence and some research around EPA, and then again, reach out to the program officers. It is their job to make sure they know who's in play in their area, and they would be more than excited, I would imagine, to be able to talk to y'all, because you've got the kids that they want to be engaged with. And then finally, one other group that you may not be aware of, but who they raise money to implement the kinds of energy and water conservation efforts that your camps may be wanting to do, are the U.S. Green Building Council chapters around the states. So every state has the U.S. Green Building Council chapter. And they often have dollars that they've raised to partner with community organizations in order to implement efficiency efforts. And they are looking for those partners. So I would just reach out to those offices as well. Again, just picking up the phone, calling them and having a conversation to see if that's something that they've got, or if that's something that they would be willing to partner with you on. in doing a grant application. And again, I think with a lot of these cases, it's going to be the more the merrier on those applications, as long as it makes sense monetarily. So, I mean, off the top of my head, I think those are really good ones. And then the final one I would say is there's a group called Children in Nature Network, CN&N, and their entire worldview is around the emotional, psychological, and learning values that come from children spending time in nature. And they have a lot of really great resources who may be able to help with dollars in order to expand the work that y'all are doing in this effort.
Awesome. Wow, those are some great resources, Leesa. And I mean, even off the top of my head, Green Camps, as we've developed, has connected and have contacts in those different areas. I think really being able to create that case for support, right? Like if we can have a really strong case for it, how do we use data to drive that? And again, I refer back to earlier in the presentation, there's a lot of things to take away from this, but really if we can gather data to really drive that case for support. So I definitely encourage you, if you haven't signed up for the needs assessment, it's a good baseline that we can start to get a really good overview of where the camp industry stands, what their behaviors and attitudes are towards sustainability, and what their priorities are. So if we find a strong priority, I hear a lot about composting, I hear a lot about recycling, I hear a lot about solar. And so I think that idea of a collective is actually a focus that we wanted to share as a call to action for this webinar, that we'll follow up and invite folks to participate in different collaborative, from grant applications to bulk purchasing for sustainable goods and services. Some sustainable products and goods that we could highlight and demonstrate in the camp environment, I think could be a really valuable educational opportunity, but it might be financially out of one individual camp to pursue that. If we look at organic clothes or recyclable toothbrushes and things like that, I think can have a really strong impact. And again, there's power in numbers. So thank you for reiterating that collective idea there. Appreciate all those good ideas and resources. I see more comments and questions coming in. In just a moment, we're just going to open it up and really focus on answering some of those questions to make sure everyone has an opportunity to share those. Real quick before we do that, one of the items that came up during the discussion for planning this webinar series, or webinar right now, not a series, we just decided to just launch this and see what the response was. I mentioned earlier, outreach education is such a big focus of Green Camps, and we feel that the webinars is such a great way to reach a diverse population without folks having to travel and be in places. So we do plan on conducting additional webinars in the future, but one topic that came up was the idea of diversity, equity, inclusion, and we add belonging on there. If you're a Brene Brown fan, you'll know where that piece of it comes in. But the question of how does sustainability intersect with diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging is, I think, a very relevant topic that we want to integrate as we provide education around sustainability. This came up as we were planning this webinar, and I actually reached out and had great conversations with folks at Intersectional Environmentalists and Justice Outside. And from those conversations, we decided that rather focus on this topic directly integrated into this webinar, we want to provide a future webinar that will really dive a little bit deeper in there, but yet still be able to incorporate this intersection in all of our conversations, whether we're talking about composting or solar. How does the DEI piece of it intersect into this conversation? And I'll share, we're kind of out of time here, but I'll share one quick story. I've had 2 board members that we onboarded to Green Camps recently, and both of them in the application process asked, how is Green Camps focusing on diversity, equity, inclusion in our work that we're doing? And my general response was, well, we work with a great diversity of camps all around the country, all around the world, and they serve a diverse population. So it was kind of a cop-out of an answer in how we're doing that. But this webinar, again, this opportunity came up, and this is where we feel that we can really drive home a lot of these subjects to really focus on that. So again, this is one of the topics that we'll pitch for future webinars coming up, but want you to think a little bit more, and hopefully reading this information on the screen will give you a baseline understanding of the intersection of sustainability and diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. I'll also say I'm not an expert in this subject, and want to continue to learn and grow, and that's why we bring subject matter experts in to present on these topics, so that we can get a really good critical view and understanding from credible experts in each of those subjects. And with that, I want to go ahead and appreciate both of our speakers. Thank you, Leesa. Thank you, David, for joining us and sharing your expertise and information. And yeah, just thank you for sharing everything. I think there were probably a lot of really good pieces of information that were taken away from this. So Leesa, I see you put your contact information in the chat window. Again, we will follow up to discuss the idea of that Green Camps Collective that Leesa was sharing about how we can collaborate on grant opportunities, from group purchasing deals for sustainable goods and services. There is power in numbers. And as we come together and we really put our voice forward to demonstrate that the camp industry is poised for really becoming a global model for what sustainability means and what it looks like. It can be overwhelming, and that's why Green Camps was founded, to help build frameworks for any camp to begin modeling and understanding what sustainability means to you. So we will again be following up with those information, as well as the resource that will be put together as a result of the information and questions that came from this session. And let's see. Yeah, so we're gonna now just shift over to question and answer. I know one question that came up was about the, let's see. Who are the organizations or consultants who can help guide summer camps in taking maximum advantage of Inflation Reduction Act? So I know there's a bunch of money pouring into that. I was at a session by Elizabeth Bagley, who's a board member for the American Camp Association and also works with Project Drawdown. She highlighted this and talked about all the crazy amounts of money that are becoming available. Does anyone have any insight into that, the Inflation Reduction Act and all the monies coming with that?
That's that EPA money. EPA is my understanding that EPA is the one who's been charged with the disbursement of those funds.
Gotcha. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Perfect. So that relates to that there. See, Sandra mentioned something about the recyclingpartnership.org. So recycling inclusion. Sandra, do you have more or experience in working with that? Just put you on the spot like that, didn't I?
I will say there is a funder named Novellus that does a lot of funding in the recycling space. They're particularly focused on collecting aluminum and telling the story of how infinitely recyclable aluminum is. And I think for camps in particular, if y'all make a commitment to move away from single-use bottled water and into canned water, because they do have canned water that they have partnered with an organization to provide canned water, and they want to move folks away from single-use plastics and back into aluminum. And so they do have some funds, and again, that might be a place, Danny, where you guys could do some collective purchasing of that water, but then also some of the dollars, actual funding dollars to implement recycling programs and also education programs. They have some resources that they like to tie to their funding.
Awesome.
It's Novelis, Novelis.
Novelis, perfect. Yeah, and these are the things, again, we're going to compile all this information, and this will be a really great starting point that, you know, when you think about the funding, where do we go? And I'm sure this conversation will continue to grow. Lauren, hi, Lauren. Lauren said, idea for next step, is there a way to see who is here based on the EPA regions? So most people, when they registered, did put the state that they were calling in from. And so I think we can do some follow-up information, and maybe that's a good idea to regionalize some of these approaches. I imagine there's probably some foundations or grant opportunities from that would be more national, but it might make more sense to go regional on that. So it's definitely something we can look into. Let's see what else is coming in here. And again, at any point, if you have a question, feel free to just raise your hand or just pop in, open up your camera and just start chatting on there.
Danny, I also wonder if there's not a way for y'all to develop some centralized language for those EPA grants that everybody in the different regions could use as a framing point, just in order to help really strengthen the argument. And you know, you know, to David's point again, this honesty thing, like letting the EPA regional program officers know that you guys are working collectively all around the country and are submitting similar requests. They would not have a problem with that. They would actually probably feel like it strengthens the opportunity for the funds to be spent correctly and as applied for. So that first round of grants isn't due until the middle of April. So there's still time to pull that language together if y'all choose to do that. And there's two different ones. There's the environmental and climate justice side, and then there's also G2G grants, which are government grants, but they have to have private sector partners in the work. So that's another, and those are, you can apply for both.
Awesome. Yeah, and I mean, and that's a part of this challenge, right? Is having the people to take these actions and do applications and write them all up and such. And I hope that through this work, we can take some of the hurdles out of that. I know I would love to have like templates of draft language that a camp can take and just kind of tear apart and make it their own, but it does a lot of the groundwork for you, is one of the things, because you know, it's challenging. It's very time consuming. If you're fortunate to have a grant funder or a grant writer within your organization, that's helpful. But I'm sure there's a priority list of other things that you're trying to fund as well. So as many hurdles that Green Camps can help take out, but also the collective there to do that as well. So Forrest asked, what kind of actions can we take / uplift that don't require any funding at all? Direct action, please. I love it. So there, you know, I think green behavior change is one of the most powerful and easiest things that we can do. And camps are already pretty well positioned to do that. I mean, our goal at the end of the day is how do we provide positive learning experiences for campers? I like to talk about, you know, we get the phone call at the end of the summer. What did you do to my kid? They're saying please and thank you. They're clearing the table. They're sweeping the floor. They're making their bed. How can we inspire behavior so that the phone calls include they're turning the lights off, they want to start a compost program, they're turning the shower off when in between when they're washing? You know, I think the behavior change are very low level implementation to really create that action. It does take a little bit of staff training to be able to do that, and empowering your staff to facilitate some of those conversations. We published an article in ACA Camping Magazine in the staff training edition last year that really focuses on this subject, simple things that your staff can do to model green behavior. And I mean, we all know that staff are the captain planets of the camp, right? And so if you're modeling these behaviors, your campers are going to fall in, from using water bottles to the simple action of just picking up a piece of trash. I'll also say Green Camps has a lot of resources that can help kind of build a platform and framework to better understand what initiatives you can take. And yes, a lot of these initiatives can be no-cost initiatives, minus the fact that no cost is relative, right? Because you're going to invest time into almost anything you do. And time is money. Time is very valuable, especially March 1st, as we're moving into the camp season. We know how valuable that time is. So I would love to hear from other folks as well about actions that don't require funding as well, if you want to chime in on that as well. Krista said, I work for a faith-based camp which hasn't connected their social justice focus as a sustainable goal. What kind of data should I look at to begin convincing them the need to join the sustainability movement? Anyone experienced in this? So I'll kick off. Oh, go ahead. Somebody had something.
Oh, I just typed an answer in there. There's a lot of organizations doing this work. And so you could check out their website and resources to see if one feels like it would be particularly relevant to you all in your organization. But like intersectional environmentalism is one. Outdoor Oath, they're doing a lot of like outreach and getting people to attend webinars and sign up and understand that like equity and inclusion is really important when talking about sustainability, as well as Justice Outside. They used to be called Youth Outside until a year or two ago. So that name may or may not be more familiar to people, but that's a great place to start. And that might help you find other organizations.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you, Creighton. And Creighton actually is one of our advisory board members for Green Camps and was a big advocate for bringing this into the conversation. So thank you for that. Leesa, I see that you're parting. I'm going to go ahead, and if folks need to jump off and move on to the next thing, thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. Leesa, thank you for, again, sharing your information. And we appreciate everyone coming in. We'll stick around for a little bit if there's other conversations or questions that pop up. We'll stay on for just a little bit longer. But again, thank you, everybody, for making sustainability a priority within your organization, and let us know how we can support you. This recording will be shared out along with the resources that are collected as a result of all these great conversations. So we'll make sure to get that out to everyone.
Can I jump in with a question?
100%. Yeah, please.
Say
All right.
no.
I figured everybody did. No. Yeah, so I'm the one that, thanks, Creighton, for your sharing. I'm the one that asked that question there with the faith-based. And yeah, so I just relocated. I've lived in Sweden for the past 15 and taken a job here in Texas, where I am at times in culture shock. So although I am American, I am in culture shock. So with that, I'm curious, David, I feel like you work a lot with data, and you were talking about that. What are some good data points for me to start collecting and to start?
Firstly, whatever answer I give you, please don't shoot me. You live in Texas, I live in Florida. You buy a burger and they give you a gun. So we just got to be careful, right?
I know.
I'm sure it's very similar to Sweden. almost identical.
Right. Everybody seems to think so.
Yeah, I think the data points are all about impact, because that's really where it is. The challenge is, how do you demonstrate impact in the psychology of people's minds, right? And there's plenty of evidences. There's certainly plenty of studies that do that. I mean, pretty much every study around mental health is essentially trying to grab data from inside the brain. Krista, I think there's two ways to approach it. One is to acknowledge it's not scientific. If you're going to do that, the most important thing to do is to not try to sell something that's not authentic or truthful. So what I say to donors is, look, we do some pre-testing of people before they join. We do some post-testing. We make some assumptions based on that. We even do focus groups where we ask about people's perspectives. So the truth in the camp world is the dirty hidden secret is people think it's about the children. It's just not. It's about the staff. And we forget that you have two clients. You have the clients that pay to come to you, and then you have the clients that you pay to be there. The most impactful group from a narrative point of view, and I'm deliberately sort of moving away from the data points because it's uncomfortable for people and it's difficult to prove, is what was the impact on the young adults? Because there's nowhere else left where you can bring 18 or 16 to 18 to 25-year-olds together and create a cohort group. So it doesn't necessarily always have to be about the topic you are educating them on or working with the children. Sometimes it can be, look, we're the last bastion of a place where young adults can come together, become a familiar group, develop relationships that will last a lifetime. And by the way, if they have the same interests and ideas, they'll be reinforced. And where they can screw up and it's okay. And I know that sounds crazy, but in the faith-based world especially, there's this notion of perfection. And there's this notion of what do we aim to be and why. And it's based around a doctrine which isn't necessarily your sustainability doctrine. So I would be really cautious about how you do that. And I don't know what faith-based organization it is, but what I found is there's a difference between the programmatic people and the religious doctrine people. And sometimes they collide and collaborate and it fits beautifully. And sometimes it just never will. And the key is, okay, so where's the impact? If you can find common ground on impact, and they are sometimes more comfortable with the notion of, well, yeah, we don't necessarily want to broadcast that, but we're comfortable with the idea that you've brought together a group of young adults who are working on common good and they're not out robbing or shooting people. And we're making good citizens, which is ultimately what we're in the business of doing. Does that in any way help, or have I completely bullshitted around the issue?
Yeah, no, I feel like it helps. And I think what you did is you zoned me into a group that I haven't considered yet. And that would be, right now we're in the process of hiring. So I've got a goal of hiring 230 college age youth.
I mean, think about the power of that
group and do that. Because I've just been thinking about programs and thinking about, okay, data and the campers. And yeah, so I think I like that.
And the great thing about staff is easily you can do pre-test and you can do post-camp testing, and you can say, and again, it's quasi-scientific, it's not a rigorous academic study, but what you can say is, when you came to camp, where would you rate your belief in the importance of educating youth on sustainability? Where's your own belief system? And then just see if you move the needle at the end. And if you do, you pick that data. And if you don't, you do what every academic and politician has ever done in the world, which is ignore it. Sell on the stuff that reinforces your work.
Point. Yep.
And I hate to say, and I'm not saying it flippantly, but in the end, you're doing really good work. So I'm ethically okay with that.
Okay. Yeah, thank you.
And Marty's absolutely right. A number of, I mean, you look at the Jewish faith and you look at some of the YMCAs, they deliberately bring in the notion of saving the planet and our responsibility to steward the world as a major part of their contextualization of their program. But I just don't want you to ignore that group of people that frankly are the ones that move the needle. It's not children, it's young adults. That's where I would want you to spend more of your, I tell people that's the secret sauce of camp. The kids have to be there. And ultimately we want the kids there because they become the young adult staff. But they're children. Who really cares about children? My God, it's about the young adults that matters from an impact point of view. Yeah. And by the way, do they go back to their schools and create clubs based on knowing each other and being together, all of that stuff? Thank you for asking the question as well. It's a great question. Sorry about Texas.
My last follow-up is just that like social and emotional learning and EI&D have such a big overlap, even though we kind of talk about them separately. And I think like that's such a hot button thing in the educational world. There's a lot of more research in the world about SEL that you might be able to incorporate into your conversations about DE&I. And I think some people have dropped some good resources into the chat you can check out as well.
And I'm fascinated. That's great. And great. And Lauren put in about, Sister Karen. In the end, that was the other thing I should have said. If you're receiving resistance from an entire group, find the 1 or 2 champion leaders who will stand alongside you and will jump in to help you. Because a coalition of the willing, even if it's 2 or 3 people, is a crap load easier than trying to convert unconvertible people. It's not worth your time and effort and your enthusiasm. It will dampen it. So go with the people who want to run with you. And by the way, if you do something really cool and exciting and sexy, you'll be surprised how many of those people suddenly say, well, I was always with Krista on that.
Well, I just have to offer a word of thankfulness. So I've been in the camp world now for about 1.5 years, and I'm really excited because I feel like I just found my people right here.
That's great. And Danny, I want to make sure we're thanking you. I mean, this simply wouldn't have happened without you, and you're the catalyst for this. And not just that, but a really decent human being, which I rarely say about anybody. But congrats on doing this.
Thank you. No, I appreciate that. Yeah, the response is really positive, and I think it's something that I see in all the outreach education that I do. I mean, this is the National ACA conference in Florida last week. We ran into each other. A lot of folks that are here were there as well, and it's just nothing but strong interest and desire in this subject. But it's complex. I mean, it's taken me years to get Green Camp to the point where we understand how is it that we can support any camp in doing this without having to be a consultant and go in and, which isn't financially viable for most camps to do that. So this is great. It's awesome to see the response and appreciate everyone for coming out, and let's move forward. Let's put some of these brilliant, huge, in your terms, David, big, hairy, audacious goals. Let's make them reality. Let's make this happen. So, and it's going to take people like us to make that happen. So cool. Well, are there any other questions, comments, concerns, compliments?
Marty, if you don't say something nice, Marty, I will hunt you down.
I'm going to say that Forrest appears to have his hand up.
Oh. Thanks, Marty. Forrest, what you got?
Hey, sorry. I really appreciate this. I feel like I've learned a lot, and I just really appreciate that y'all are bringing everybody together like this. I'm the one that asked the question on direct action on what we can do without spending any money. And I just want to remind everybody who's still listening, the 15 people that are left here, that there are things you can do that don't cost any money, and it's just letting nature heal itself. We forget sometimes when we're fundraising and when we're in the world of Zoom and on our computers all day, that nature is incredibly resilient when we allow it to be. Some of the things I'm doing here at Camp High Rock, we have a colony of beavers that we've been constantly fighting with over managing our lake and our stream property. I finally got into camp to work with a beaver solution expert, and we're going to let a beaver create a wetland where we had previously been not letting them create the wetland. This is going to be one really easy way. Let the beaver do the work. Another thing we can do is stop mowing our lawns as much. See what comes back. There's a seed bank under there that we've been cutting down when we're planting our non-native landscaping plants. There's a lot of time and effort that can be put into correcting our landscaping practices. But for the most part, the land is resilient. And when we give it the opportunity to come back, it will. And that will be better for us in the long term of being more resilient local climates. I have so much else to say, but I'm gonna end it because I know that we're over time. But I just really appreciate all the effort that everybody's going through. And yeah, keep it up. I hope to be in contact with y'all again.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks for sharing for us. And this is the best part of my job in in with Green Camps is hearing from folks. The case studies are fascinating. And I think sharing stories of success like that are things that really cause inspiration. I mean, that's the storytelling part of it, right? That's what is going to get people excited and motivated to find creative ways to model sustainability of their camp. So thank you so much for your energy and passion and sharing those examples with us.
Thanks a lot, guys.
Thanks, Forrest.
Awesome. Well, great. Well, we are right at the end of our time. What a fantastic program this has been. David, again, thank you very much. Leesa, on your way to the airport, thank you. Thank you to everybody who participated, and look forward to following up and keeping this group and this momentum going. So hope everybody has a good rest of your day wherever you are at in the world.